Burgess Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Well, it's actually Thursday, isn't it? Because we're actually recording this the day before.
It's pre-record. Yeah, let's be honest. Let's just be transparent. That's what we want to be on this show.
Yes, indeed. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation, and, of course, the Tour de France. But, of course, let's start with the news. So, Ben, I think you saw this around Swiss Re.
Yep.
Let me just find the right clip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Swiss Re has just issued a report this Wednesday looking at the US property casualty market. And I don't think there's anything new here, but I think it is worth just contextually picking it up. I think Swiss Re does have a reputation for thoroughness and deep analytical strength. So they have done this, and what they're really repeating is the amount of non-renewals or pullouts from cat markets in various states in the US. And also that, as we were talking about last week, is really also, there's huge pressures in homeowners markets, commercial property, and also even in the in the motor markets as well, in the auto markets. So the costs, really, the economic environment and the cost rises and all sorts of things. There is a little bit of a kind of perfect storm going on in terms of costs and expenses, and it's, as we said last year, it's the severity of these claims which is causing the problems. But it is really slowing down the industry, I think, in terms of what it's able to deliver in terms of products. I think on the upside, there is much better returns. So they're saying that P&C insurers are going to get 30% better returns on their investments now than compared with the 3 or 4 years ago. So they'll be sitting on that, I guess, and not necessarily going into more risky stuff. So I think in a way this does show that while the market rates are going up, it's not necessarily that the industry is able to step up all the time to a lot of these areas where the costs and inflation has caused price rises. So this is not great for the insurance industry overall. They do say that there'll be a decent an 8% return in the next year, and then a 9% return on equity for P&C businesses, they reckon, over the next 2 years, which aren't brilliant, but they're not bad returns. They are, kind of on the profitable side. So that's good. So you hope that gets reinvested if the markets and inflation settles down. But yeah, it's not a pretty picture.
No, yeah, and I think we've talked about this in the past few weeks, haven't we? This, whether it's regulation coming in which is pushing out in insurance, the unintended consequence of that, or whether it's just hard economic facts. It's tough, isn't it? I kind of think there's opportunity there as well. I think if you have an organisation that spots an opportunity in these kind of segments where they aren't being covered at the edges, I think there's always opportunity, isn't there? So hopefully, and that goes into London's hand. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the market's working as it should, I suppose, in some way. I mean, the rates are going up, and therefore there are opportunities if you get it right. And I suppose this is where underwriting, good old-fashioned underwriting comes into play. Picking the right risks and making sure you've avoided the ones that are not going to be too good. I guess that's true. I think that's true in P&C markets. I think probably less so when you get into the kind of motor markets or whatever, where it's a numbers game, and you can't really pick and choose risks. There's just blanket rises in cost.
Yeah, cool, excellent bit of context there. Thanks for that, Ben. Right, let's move on to the word on the data stream. the word on the data street?
Okay, the word on the data street is 1.5 billion, but more importantly, $207 million has been raised as a result of Fidelis having its IPO last week on Thursday. Shares, as you can see there in this article from Thomson Reuters, fell 6.4%. So generally, this has been seen as a fairly tepid or lukewarm, whichever synonym you want to use, debut on the market. So not very exciting. And actually, right, okay, $200 million, £180 million, whatever way you want to look at it, is not a huge amount of investment necessarily for the business. So I think they were projecting much higher than that, towards 250-300 million when the original price was quoted. But they've gone ahead. I suspect some of it is to do with what we just talked about with Swiss Re markets and the generally kind of feeling of it's a bit of an uncertain, maybe lackluster profitability. So investors not getting too excited about it. But at least it's an IPO and it's happened, and Fidelis has got it over the line. But I don't think they'll be popping the champagne corks quite yet on this one.
Yeah, big numbers. This is way above my pay grade to comment on any of this stuff. And as you know, Ben, I'm a serial, really bad investor.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. I just wondered if you've been involved with this.
Yeah. Sorry.
It says at the bottom of the article, lead investor Jeremy Burgess comments.
Yeah.
Another disappointment in my portfolio.
Yeah. Ever shrinking portfolio.
I mean, it's not terrible, but it's just a disappointment. And I think when you want, these are great big things. You pay a lot of fees to investment banks, and to come out and say, well, it wasn't quite what we wanted. Bit of a damp squib, as they say.
Squib. Yeah.
Damp
Indeed.
squib. Not a damp squid. That's a different thing.
That's absolutely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which they generally are.
Damp squib is a firework that doesn't go off, in case people who are not au fait with that term.
Yeah. Good. As I say, more context. Let me get into some safer ground. So I saw. Well, we both saw this, didn't we, Ben? And so this article today, actually, insurance.
I rejected it, and you accepted it.
I did. My editorial board, the whole production team here, said this was a good one.
Stormy meeting, but it got through.
So why did it take a pandemic to drive electronic placing in London market? Fundamentally, I don't have anything really to say against the article. Everything is right. What I kind of take a little bit issue with is kind of the narrow nature of kind of the lens through which stuff is still being looked at within the London market. Again, so just picking up here. So it took a long time because it's complex, but it's essential that we get this up and running quickly to enable an efficient marketplace. Okay, that's fine, but I think that conversation needs to be broadened out. We've been saying this for years. We need to bring in the customer experience. We need to bring in clients into this conversation. It's too still internally focused around the mechanics of what actually goes on in the London market. And just to say it becomes efficient, what does that actually mean? And there's a few other bits in the article as well. If the slides are working. Yeah, simply put, insurers must adopt a digital first and API first strategy. Again, the kind of buzzwords. What does that actually mean? What's it mean for everybody? What's it mean for clients? These acronyms and buzzwords need to be unpicked and have a direct correlation between how it's going to impact organizations and how it's going to impact clients for the positive. As I say, I don't have anything fundamentally against the article. It just seems just too narrow still.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. I mean, that's why I wasn't so keen on looking at it, because it didn't tell me anything new, and it was saying the same old in lots of ways. I'm not, again, I don't think there's anything I can vehemently or violently disagree with, but But data first. In fact, Tim Rayner from Veris wrote, I think, did a LinkedIn post this morning saying data first is a bit of an empty phrase and doesn't really kind of, believe it's, when people talk about it, it just doesn't, it's become a bit meaningless. And I tend to agree. I think it's, look, we can just say API, data first, no rekeying, But we've said that for years. I mean, this isn't a benefit. This is literally about talking about administration and then some vague terms about computers doing things which most of us don't care about. Absolutely with you that we have to focus on much more about the benefits through the distribution chain in the market and how we resolve that. I think just saying it's difficult in insurance and it's hard, it's not this. I mean, I've been looking at e-trading recently, and there are some clunky parts of e-trading, although it's done, a lot of brokers are doing it now, something like 70%. And we just put out a report, which we'll talk about perhaps next week. But basically, talking to some of the the kind of standard setters in the tech businesses, is that there are a lot of issues to be solved, but you've really got to focus very clearly on the benefits of this. Otherwise, you get bogged down in everybody saying, well, let's just talk endlessly about how many questions we add to a cyber policy or a homeowners or a business, comp type policies. It doesn't really get you anywhere. And what it does, it becomes, it's that, that phrase, small circles and big circles. The industry tends to think in small circles, and then it just goes, it's kind of, just goes back, as you say, internal and doesn't do anything. Whereas actually, if you think big circles all the time, you say, right, okay, why are we adding these questions? We shouldn't be adding too many questions because it doesn't streamline the process, the journey that the poor old broker, customer, whoever it is, has to go through.
Yeah. And just coming back to that, if and I teed it up a little bit last week, but I found out more about the big ticket platform, which is that you're talking big circles. That's a huge circle around how they're going to fix the renewal process for clients. So they've looked at it, and these are like serious people with a background in the industry, with serious money backing it, who have gone, this process is broken for a number of reasons. Can technology help fix it? Yes, it can. And it isn't coming from an insurance point of view, it's coming from a client point of view, which to me just gives it so much more power. Because if clients say, this is how we want to work from now on, that's it. It's going to be game changing. So we're going to try and get the CEO of Big Ticket on to talk a little bit more about kind of the vision, but how it's going to work practically, and perhaps the steps to how it's going to work. But,
it'd be really interesting in that show, because we've done a bit of work on that area, and it is still very much in the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
In terms of this process is very, very manual and expensive, and a lot of cost that's hidden is in that part of the market. And the competitiveness of London is hinges on a lot of that.
Yeah, definitely. Good. Right. Okay. Let's move it on. Let's talk LinkedIn posts.
Yeah, this is from Natalie Graham, who is head of claims at Mosaic Insurance, and she posted this. It was an interesting post to which I responded, and so did several others. So it is about picking up on the Lemonade claim that they settled a claim in 2 seconds, and Natalie, as she describes it here, the gauntlet has been thrown down, and other insurers have been challenged to beat this record. She basically through this piece says that do we need to do this? Is it necessary? Was the claim really settled in 2 seconds? Not really, but admitting or saying that, of course, it is impressive to settle a claim so quickly, regardless of what that is. It was for a bike, I think. But do we need to do that in specialty, which is one thing? And she invited comments. So my view is twofold, really. If on the specifics of this question, my answer is for definite no. I think this is a gimmick. It's a marketing gimmick from Lemonade, and they've done it before, which is paying claims very, very quickly. Always that can be done, but the world of claims is all, it's a very broad church. There's lots of different types of claims, and some of them are very, very complex and take years to resolve, and some can take a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds because they're auto checked, and that's fine. But what I think is misleading potentially, and I said this underneath, is, and what we need to do is we need to understand more about, and this goes back to our previous conversation about what are the benefits and the pain and the good points for customers ultimately. Now, I'm sure a customer doesn't mind having a claim paid in 2 seconds, but they probably wouldn't care either if it was 10 seconds or 3 minutes and they got a discount or something, or they got a ticket to the football, whatever it is. You could do all sorts of things with service which could make it more tangible, a better experience. And I could argue that, 2 seconds, the customer will probably have forgotten about the fact that anybody did this and Lemonade did it and so on. So speed on its own is not the only thing. Management of expectations and the experience is, I think, what we need to be looking at. And the experience will vary. We've got a distribution chain. There are brokers involved often. Sometimes it is just a digital journey, as this was. But those all need to be taken account of in this. So I think we need a better understanding of the fundamentals of what we are delivering, so that people like Natalie and everyone else and can get we don't have to kind of debate it, as it were. We just know that these are the kind of key factors that are very important within an industry. And I think in other industries you have that. So where, I look at supermarkets or whatever, marketing stroke operational people there know very well what the levers are they have to pull and push to make their businesses successful. I think back to, again, your earlier point about that narrow article on trading, this is how we have to think. It's a mindset. So nice, really nice post. I think it was really interesting. Plus Natalie said something nice about me as well, which is always going to get you on the show.
God, terrible.
Cheap, basically. I am cheap. I will,
do anything for publicity.
Just flatter me and you'll be on the show. It doesn't matter what you say.
That's good to know. So I think we're going to explore this in a bit more detail, London market claims, aren't we? I think we're going to try and, through your data, Ben, crystallize exactly what that service would look like and where people need to focus in terms of claims in order to deliver that. Because you're right, it isn't all about
businesses. Good businesses know this and work to these principles increasingly and apply the science. I think it's what we should get away from now is no longer should it be a debate about these general principles of service. It should be more about what's the innovation that's going to layer on top of that to create a better experience and create more business in the market, better products.
Yeah. Good. Excellent. Right. Let's introduce a video that I put together from the TinTech innovation stage. So it's David Gelly, I think it is. And he is talking about, you'll love this, Ben, AI. And is it going to take our jobs? It's actually more interesting than you think. And come back and it kind of pulls together a number of the themes that we've been talking about. So let's... So give it 8 minutes. Here we go.
So, artificial intelligence will make the human being obsolete. This was a claim made by Professor Stephen Hawking some time ago when he was still alive in a BBC interview. But don't worry, we are not there yet, unless, of course, we are part of the matrix and we don't know it. Okay? But, however, obviously, AI is actually making inroads in jobs that the human being was typically carrying out. But the argument is AI replacing the human being, or is it complementing its skills and capabilities in the process? So what we'll be exploring today are some basic elements in this solution. No one can argue, definitely, that in today's highly data-oriented world, knowledge is of crucial importance. In fact, if you think about the most successful organizations in today's world, they are really and truly maths organizations which thrive on algorithms. Think about it. You think about Google, you think about eBay, you think about Amazon, you think about Netflix. All of these companies have one thing in common. They have an algorithm which is sophisticated enough to process data and make predictions and recognize patterns in order to make better decisions for their business and for their customer. So really and truly, artificial intelligence does precisely that. It helps our companies to make better decisions and in the process to analyze the data in a better way. But artificial intelligence is not our enemy. So we have to view it in a completely different lens. It should complement us. It should not compete against us. We have different strengths and different weaknesses. And we have to identify these in order to create synergies between us. It displaces. It doesn't replace. Yes, there are certain jobs which have been made redundant, but there are other new types of occupations that are being generated that need to complement AI. For example, we need people to program the systems, but not just that. One of the most crucial, important aspects of AI is the need to train the systems to learn how to think like a human. And that is something which is going on an ongoing basis, that feeding in more data, feeding in more insights into the system so that it can be able to predict in a better way the decisions that it has to make. But finally, it cannot be a game, a zero-sum game. It has to be a game where everyone wins. So organizations, including insurance companies, need to realize that when implementing systems, AI solutions, they have to keep in mind their own people as well, and to make sure that it is not just getting them all the benefits and all the other people losing out, but about making a better world for everyone so that there is acceptance across the whole organizations. But what are the different complementarities between the human being and artificial intelligence? It is quite obvious, really and truly. So far, the artificial intelligence is fast, accurate, consistent, and rational. So it is very good at processing data, analyzing that data, making predictions, and making and suggesting decisions based on those on that data. But it is a closed system. So artificial intelligence can be equated to the mind. But when you look at human intelligence, yes, it does those things, but it doesn't do them in a perfect way like artificial intelligence does. However, the most benefits that you can get from a human being and your own employees are intuition, creativity, emotional intelligence, which is fundamentally important, and cultural sensitivity. All things which contribute to our very survival. In fact, if you read about the history of evolution, one can argue that the Homo sapiens of today has survived not because he was more intelligent than the Neanderthal man, but because he had better social skills. And this is also crucially important, even for organizations. The need to understand your customer and the need to provide a better service by equating the communication model in an appropriate manner. In other words, we're not just processing data, but we're processing experiences of people, handling their emotions, and giving them a proper experience in the process. What type of tasks do they carry out, and how differently they carry them out? Artificial intelligence broadly takes basically three main tasks. So they can either learn, analyze, and predict. That is better known as machine learning. They can communicate in the form of text or speech, natural language processing, or move, assemble, pick, and sort, which is robotics. The human intelligence can innovate, can teach and impart, and build relationships. So combining all these elements is essential in developing a competitive advantage for your organization. So how is this applicable within the insurance industry? If you look at the value chain of the insurance industry, you can see 5 basic steps. This is a very simple model. You've got selling, underwriting, operating, processing claims, and managing customers. And there is quite a portfolio of different activities that are carried out. So all of these things interface with the human being who creates the relationships, provides advice, manages through exception, and strengthens the relationships. When you use the artificial intelligence, especially RPA, I'm not a very big fan of RPA. I really struck by what Alistair said earlier on in the case of simplification. And what I find from my experience when implementing digital solutions, including in the insurance industry, you find that rather than trying to simplify the processes, what they do is they add complexity in the technology to address that particular problem. Whereas, in fact, the starting point should effectively be simplification. Simplification of that particular process, streamlining waste, removing any bottlenecks that are in the process, and then implementing the simplest technology that addresses those needs. That is fundamentally important. So, artificial intelligence should not be used to manage complexity. It should be used to leverage, first simplify, and then automate as much as possible. Clearly, we have all heard about the benefits of AI across the whole value chain. We've all heard about augmented machine underwriting, personalized insurance. We have heard about accelerated claims adjudication. Yet, obviously, the insurance industry is still light years away, unfortunately, in comparison to other sectors. And implementing AI applications in business is not an easy feat. Why? Because in practice, you can see that if around 80% of digital transformation projects fail in practice, in the case of AI solutions, the percentage is even higher. In some cases, it approaches around 90%. And why is that? Very simple. In the case of AI solutions, the implementation process is different. Why? Because this implementation process does not end when the system gets live, but it continues indefinitely because it has to be trained in order to process the data and also to learn from the people who are building it around it. I've been some time ago, I have advised the company, it was an insurance underwriter who was basically contemplating developing a new system. And I have been called in, and I was basically debating with the general manager about the introduction of a BI solution. And he told me, but we have all the data here. Why we don't really need a new system? And he took me to a room, I think it was as big as this room, and he showed me reams of paper, all with key data points that he stored. And he told me, listen, ask me anything you want, and I can give you. But that is not knowledge. That is just noise, and noise which cannot be separated, the wood cannot be separated from the chaff. What you need is really not data, but you need knowledge. And knowledge is created by combining the formal aspects of data through the processing of artificial intelligence and combining it with the human knowledge of intuition, creativity, and innovation in that process. Thank you very much.
So I particularly like that talk, Ben, because it's not groundbreaking. It's stuff we talk about all the time, but it's quite nicely put into kind of three areas about, AI is pretty complicated, so don't use it to try and transform your business. It's actually that intersection between people and technology that we often talk about, which is kind of the sweet spot that might give you some competitive advantage. And also fundamentally, you've got to have some data that's in some kind of usable form, not in a cupboard full of paper. So I just thought it was a neat presentation and kind of just took quite a complex, hype-ridden kind of topic and just kind of put it as it was, I suppose.
Yeah, it was a good talk. I mean, there's some interesting things in there, which because he put it so straightforwardly, and honestly, I suppose, in lots of ways, was one, the 90% failure rate of AI projects. I kind of pick up on language a lot in my life in what I do, because I often think that people, there's probably just a so old and I've been in business for so long, but people, like we said before, just say things, and then I sort of think, what do they really mean? And actually, if you take that talk, what he's saying at one level is that actually there's a 90% failure rate, but at another level, this is the best thing that's ever happened to the industry. So I think there's a contradiction in there, and where I also think there is some difficulty, and this is not to criticize the talk at all, but is when you talk about this kind of delineation, if you like, between humans, almost the view that AI is right and perfect in some areas, and humans are kind of a little bit messy and complex, but they add something somewhere. Whereas actually, in reality, I don't think I would necessarily agree with that, because I don't think AI. I mean, certainly if it's failing 90% of the time in project terms, it's not right all the time. And secondly, I think that there's a notion that rationality or scientific correctness is right in some way. In other words, you make it absolute. And I don't think that's true. I think that there is always interpretation of all sorts of data and information. But rationally, a computer will say it's this, and yet actually, when you look at it, you say the counterfactuals are the most interesting part of working out what to do. And I'll give you a quick example. So we were talking about claims earlier on. The common rational notion is that claims should be paid very quickly. But years ago, I asked the claims head, is that always true? And he said, no, definitely not, because lots of businesses, for lots of reasons, don't need to or want to have the claim paid at the particular time we can pay it. So we put it into escrow and we increase the experience. Now, I don't think a computer would work that out. I mean, maybe if you built it all in, but so therefore I'm kind of challenging the notion that one is right and perfect when you can put it in, and therefore it will replace humans as far as possible. I think it's, for me, more a case of saying, where marginally does AI add to this? And at the moment, it seems to me the consensus is that it adds at the very, very simple streamlining end of things, and is nowhere near being, not just in insurance, but is nowhere near being able to be deployed in more complex areas. And in fact, it's quite dangerous often in those areas. Funny enough, I was talking to my son last night, who's the crime correspondent at the Telegraph, and he's writing a story about the chap with the crossbow who went into Windsor, and it's emerged through the story that his AI girlfriend, as it were, had, his kind of anthropomorphic girlfriend on AI had persuaded him to do this, or had added to his conviction to do it. And the press have really picked up on this, because this is the dangers of AI. They could do this if you hadn't. But there is a kind of legitimate view, is that that if you're not careful, that it'll be just another thing that does persuade, kind of slightly, people with mental health problems and all sorts of things to do things because they believe it. So I think it's that territory of what we've called the sweet spot. Yes, that's a simple way of describing it, is actually quite problematic, I think, in lots of areas. The more I think about it. But anyway, I think it was a really good talk, and it raises, as it always does, lots of questions.
Yeah, so it does. I think I would say that there is a question about the maturity of this stuff. That talk was given a couple of months ago, and it almost now feels a little bit out of date because things have moved on. And I think, and the reason I say that is because I've now seen use cases where they have taken a process, to your point, and they have applied some digital technology with some, not HAL type AI, but there's some kind of smart algorithms going on in there, and they have taken some of that drudgery away from part of the organization. So, so my view on this is that it has moved away from, oh my God, it's going to completely change the world in 18 months, to actually, okay, we can apply this technology right now in these very small, confined areas, and then later on, let's see what happens.
Yes. I don't disagree, but there's an element of, I'm going to buy. I think the car I'm going to buy I'll buy a red car, and then from that moment on, you see red cars all over the place. So there's an element of of confirmation bias in the whole discussion about AI, and you've kind of, to some extent, you've kind of exemplified it by saying, I can see all these things coming. Now, they might have been there before. And so what we might have is kind of a first flush of everybody getting on, I'll pick out that old AI thing we had in the cupboard and start that up again because everybody's talking about it. And in 3 years' time, we're in the blockchain world again, where nothing actually really happens. So I'm holding, my enthusiasm back until, there is proven, there are proven benefits. And I think there have to be, because if you look at the industry as a whole, it's not growing. We've talked about that, and we've just seen the Swiss Re results. This is not an industry that we could say is transforming. That maybe, if we were sitting here in Apple or Google or something else, we might say, wow, this is pretty transformational, maybe because we can sell a lot of this stuff. But is it every talk I see, nobody's jumping off the stage saying it's amazing, it's changed it, and here's the ROI. I think there were 3 talks at TinTech I saw on this, and they all said the cost of it is pretty huge. You have to build that in. Development times are quite long, and you've got to be very, very careful about, as was just said, about where you apply these processes, because it won't work everywhere. So I think there are huge, there are big challenges, and there's a lot of hype, and we'll just see where it goes to. But it is flavor of the month at the moment, for sure.
Yeah. What flavor is that, Ben? What's your favorite flavor? Thinking ice cream.
Well, if it's on ice cream, let's just take it to a simple one. Ice cream, like pistachio.
Yeah.
Love it.
Ooh. Mine is coffee.
No, I wouldn't. I do drink a lot of coffee, but I wouldn't go for a coffee flavored ice cream. I'd go for pistachio with a, vanilla or something. Maybe that, toffee chip one. What's it called? Caramel chip. Where you get the chips of caramel.
Oh yeah, salted caramel.
Salted caramel. That's the one. Love that. But more purist is the pistachio. Yeah.
Yeah. Pistachio AI ice cream. They well solved it. Good. Well, that was good. Triggered a nice debate. That. So thanks, David, for your talk. Right.
Why are they all Italian? Was he Italian? There was 2 Italians talking about AI. What's going on?
They weren't really. They were robots.
Why are they Italians? I mean, I'll tell you the other thing that Italians make is air conditioning. Every air conditioning unit is Italian. I don't understand that in a world where China took over most technology. But anyway, just a thing. Now AI. They're in on AI, the Italians.
There you go.
Maybe it's because it's got AI in the Italian. I and A all over the place.
It's an Italian job.
Ooh.
Oh. Anyway, let's wrap this thing up because we have to talk about the Tour de France. Spoiler alert, in case you haven't seen last night's result. This is obviously Wednesday, not Thursday.
You should have seen it.
Fine. But yeah, brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant so far. And it's really mixing it up, isn't it? Tons of people out as well. Absolutely love it. But yeah, this kid is amazing. Absolutely
well, it's very exciting because there's a lot of new riders, really, for me. Anyway, they're all really young and they're like incredible. They don't seem to take drugs anymore. And, just as much as Pogacar was the hero before and the invincible, he's now not at all. So it's brilliant. Yes, it's really good to watch. Really good.
Yeah. There was a really good interview, just bringing it back to insurance and data with Mark Cavendish, just talking about this is his last Tour de France. He's been doing it for 16 years or maybe longer. But he was talking about when he first got into the sport, and the way that you got into the sport is that you did something on a race that made you stand out, and then you were given a contract, and then you got into a team and blah, 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 blah. Whereas now they just look at your numbers, what wattage you can push, how far you can go for all this kind of, it's a very data, taking that Brailsford kind of the incremental gains to the absolute extreme and getting into the data of it.
Like Lizzie Simmons wasn't it, talking about that? But she also did say that, to the whole conversation here is that there is all that technology, but there's a huge amount of psychological stuff as well that they do about how they envision the race. And that thing where she said you never think of the end of the race and winning, you always think of the next bit. You break it down into the smallest parts, which is I thought was really interesting actually in terms of performance. And actually, I think certainly the stuff I've done with a lot of teams is exactly that. They don't like to think about the big vision because that seems like too much of a mountain to climb. They want to think about the small improvements that they can make all the time.
Yeah, and you saw it yesterday. I think it was with 4K to go. That was almost the starting point for some of them to go, right, this is where I'm going to really go for.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of how performance works, though, isn't it? I mean, the cycle race is a very good analogy for all performance in that it's broken down into a kind of an initial phase, which it follows a pattern, doesn't it? Really, I mean, very rarely does anybody just go out front and win. There's a sort of element of cat and mouse, and then it all data-wise comes together in a finale, which is how it should be. But that's like performance in a lot of ways. It's a science to it.
Good, excellent. Right, what are you doing this weekend, Ben?
I'm actually going to Eastbourne. It's my daughter's birthday, so we're celebrating that. And I was supposed to be paddleboarding, but that's now next week. So I'll tell you about that when I do it.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, my mum and dad are down, so I'm with them this weekend. I told you this story, but I picked them up from the station last night. It was quite late. It's like 11 o'clock, and I was halfway through watching the highlights. I actually paused it at a very critical point, and I picked my dad up and I said, "Oh, Dad, I nearly didn't pick you up because it's so exciting and just watching the tour highlights." And he just told me who the winner was, and they got the yellow jersey. I was like, I'm supposed to do that. Stop it.
Just leave him. Push him out of the car and leave him on the side of the road.
That's what I'm doing. I almost left him at the station and said, "I'll take your bags, but you can walk."
Yeah,
it's only 5 miles. But anyway, I didn't.
Get the bus.
I'm a good son.
You are.
Right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend, and we shall see you next week.
Yeah. Have a great weekend.